America's most successful and highly rated news show presenter, perhaps of all time, Tucker Carlson, has taken a piece of my heart and torn into the Australian mainstream media and especially the ABC for their twisted priorities in terms of the stories that they cover. Tucker has been in Australia this past week doing a series of shows with Clive Palmer's Australian Freedom Conference. He took some questions from the media in Canberra on Wednesday night, and he learned what a joke Australian journalism has become firsthand. First, this question from the delightful 9 media newspapers, The Age and Sydney Morning Herald.
The media can be extremely negative, so it's nice to hear uplifting comments about our country.
It's an amazing country.
It is, and I think we forget that in Australia oftentimes, so I appreciate that. You've preempted my question on Putin.
Putin!
I think you did strategically because you knew it's what we'd ask.
Putin! He's so bad!
Mainstream right-wingers like Boris Johnson, Australian Liberals, some of their MPs are in the crowd, are vehemently anti-Putin. They believe he's a reprehensible figure who doesn't believe in the values of conservatism, such as the rule of law and democracy, which gives us the freedoms we have in our country. I'm interested, do you feel any level of shame or regret that you were termed a useful idiot, and then post your interview, Vladimir Putin himself said in his Russian media that he was surprised at how weak your questions were, and he also said that you were wrong when you said that no other journalist had asked to interview him. He said, that's not true. We only thought Tucker was the only person to report fairly.
I thought that you were describing Putin as a psychopathic liar, and yet now you're taking his word for things?
Now, I can't begin to unpack how passive-aggressive that question was from the Sydney Morning Herald's and Melbourne Age's Paul Sakal, how unjournalistic it was, how editorial it was, and laced with self-assured self-righteousness. It was typical of the Sydney and Melbourne journo set. A 2-minute lecture, not a question. And I edited it down. The question was basically, you're an idiot. Are you ashamed of your interview with Putin? And Tucker was smart enough to call it out right up front.
Let me just quickly unpack your absurd soliloquy if I can. First, I'm stuck on the idea that Boris Johnson is a right-winger. Do you know Boris Johnson? I do. Boris Johnson is a criminal buffoon who, like so many who claim to love Ukraine, is single-handedly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men in this war that Ukraine cannot win. And I would refer you to Wikipedia. How many more people does Russia have than Ukraine? Do you know? 100 million. 100 million. And in a land war, that's a relevant number. It is not possible for Ukraine to beat Russia. The best they can do is sue for peace. That's been known, including by Zelensky, who wanted that since the early days of this conflict. And Boris Johnson, on orders from the Biden administration, shut down, and this is not a disputed fact, this is a fact, admitted by everybody now, shut down the peace negotiations almost 2 years ago. And Ukraine has been completely destroyed. And now Zelensky has passed a law allowing foreign corporations to own land there. So you tell me what Ukraine is going to look like in 30 years.
Tucker Carlson speaks his mind. He's razor sharp and he's one of the best broadcasters and communicators the planet has ever seen. He got fired from Fox News for doing what journalists are supposed to do, asking probing, more difficult questions and actually challenging the rulers, the elites and those in power. He would criticise both the left and the right. He never asks anyone to agree with what he says. I certainly don't agree with him some of the time. And he believes his role in interviews is to shut up and let the other person speak and let the audience think for themselves, something most Australian journalists wouldn't be caught dead doing. Tucker became immensely successful. To understand just how successful, take a look at this. These are the ratings for America's 3 biggest 24-hour cable news channels. Fox consistently outrates the ratings of left-wing lunatics at MSNBC and the left-wing bores at CNN combined. 2 million viewers in prime time. But what you can't see here is what Tucker used to rate. He used to consistently get 4 to 6 million views for his show. And he was fired at his peak. It's hard to understand how any shareholder of News Corp could be happy with the decision to remove him. But they did, because he wouldn't toe the line.
What's happened in Ukraine, orchestrated by the Western powers, including your government, and I hope you do, and driven by my government, I feel shame about it, I hope you do too, is really one of the great crimes of my lifetime. So the idea that somehow if you're against that, you're for Putin, well, of course, that's absurd. And by the way, speaking of your friend Boris Johnson, he attacked me, of course, ad hominem, and so I called him. He was a journalist, not surprisingly, a man of low character, not shocking. And so I called him and I said, well, you've called me all these names. Why don't you sit down for a conversation? I happen to be in your rainy, depressing slum, London, and we could have a conversation. And he said, I won't do that unless you pay me $1 million. That's a fact. That's an non-disputed fact. I have the text messages. Well, just today, Julian Assange was released after 12 years. 12 years in custody. And your government did nothing. The UK made it possible, and the United States demanded it. You tell me how that's consistent with the rule of law or democracy. It's not. It's ruled by the intel agencies. It's lawlessness, and it's a crime. So I'm not saying that we're morally equivalent to Putin. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is our concern should be first and foremost, how are our countries run? And we give our own leaders a pass time and time again because they point to some other creep on the world stage and say, he's bad. Kim Jong-un is bad. Well, yeah, of course he's bad. That's why I don't live in North Korea. That's why I don't live in Russia. I have no interest in living in Russia. But the point is, you're bad too. And the fact that he's bad does not allow you to continue being bad.